The European Union has agreed on a new raft of sanctions against Russia, targeting its shadow fleet of oil tankers and banning its imports of liquefied natural gas. The Danish EU presidency announced the package, which aims to further starve Moscow of energy revenue and pressure Vladimir Putin into negotiations. The move comes after US President Donald Trump slapped sanctions on Russia's two largest oil companies. Volodymyr Zelensky has arrived in Brussels to join an EU summit on Ukraine. He was asked whether he thought the sanctions would make a difference to Russia.
I think that, of course, it's more tough sanctions on Russia. 19th package is very important, and of European leaders of EU, but American sanctions are also very important. And this is a good signal to other countries in the world to join the sanctions. You know that not only energy, we need shadow fleet, etc., and continue until Putin will stop this war. So these are decisions very important. Ceasefire is possible, of course, and I think all of us need ceasefire. But we need more pressure on Russia for ceasefire.
Our correspondent Tessa Walther joins me now from Brussels. Tessa, we heard the Ukrainian president there praising the latest sanctions package from the EU. How severe are the new measures really?
They are not groundbreaking, but they do have some major points in them. Let me remind you, the first one is the limitation of further export of Russian oil and gas, and especially LNG. So that is a first. The second point is adding more vessels to Russia's shadow fleet, restricting its movement at sea. And the third point, and that is also restricting someone's movement, is the movement of Russian diplomats inside the EU. What we see here at the summit is that leaders really want to send a clear message. We stand behind Ukraine. It has been some complicated weeks for the Ukrainian President Zelensky, and we've seen it here symbolically. The Council President Costa, he came onto the red carpet together with him, showing this support, also quite physically, underlining that the EU will continue to support Ukraine as long as it needs to. And with kicking off this summit, having the sanction package already agreed upon, they really see that, yes, they show we want to do this.
But no frozen Russian assets yet. What's the holdup?
Yes, absolutely. And I can tell you, we here in Brussels can't hear it anymore. For months, we have been hearing the discussions around the frozen assets. And what it essentially is that for 3.5 years, they have been held here in Belgian bank accounts. And frankly, Europe is running out of money. We are talking about 140 billion euros that could keep Ukraine going in its war efforts for 2 to 3 years, insiders tell us. But one little country is holding back, and that is Belgium. Because, frankly, they're saying, well, what happens if Russia comes one day knocking at our doors wanting their money back? And some international court rules that is fair. Then they want to see guarantees. They want other countries to step in and also join to then be able to pay this money. But so far, these guarantees have been discussed and have not been agreed upon. And Belgium might actually go further and say, well, what happens if, for example, Belgian companies will be sanctioned inside Russia? So really, this will definitely dominate the afternoon here in Brussels.
What else is on the agenda today in terms of assistance for Ukraine?
There's one big question, and especially Emmanuel Macron, the French president, put it at the table. So what happens if we agree on these 140 billion euros? We defreeze the assets, we give it to Ukraine. Well, we don't want Ukraine go shopping in the US and use US weapons to defend itself. We want it to boost the European economy, the European defense industry. But Europe is just not there yet. It is only building up its economy, its defense industry, and probably can't deliver. So also these will be discussions that we will be hearing. And there is a lot on the agenda. It is set to be a one-day summit. So far, the EU Council President Costa has made it a one-day summit and has succeeded in that. But with all of this in discussions, it might take very long tonight or go and drag into Friday.
That's Tessa Walther in Brussels. Thanks so much, Tessa. Earlier, I spoke to Juri Rescheto, head of our Riga bureau in Latvia, where DW follows developments in Russia after being banned from operating there. I asked him how much of a blow these sanctions are for Russia, really.
Well, Nicole, the new US and EU sanctions are aimed, as we've heard, at the Russian state-owned company Rosneft, first and foremost, led by Igor Sechin. This man, Putin's former bodyguard, has long since become one of Putin's closest confidants and also one of the richest men in Russia. The other company to be punished is Lukoil. Given that these companies continue to make billions for the Russian state, including from Europe, by the way, this could be a serious blow. A study by Greenpeace shows that in the first 8 months of this year alone, several billion cubic meters of Russian LNG gas were imported into the EU. So we are talking about a lot of money here. In addition to the measures on LNG gas, the new sanctions include a ban on further banks from Russia and allied countries from accessing the EU capital markets and a ban on trading with them. For the Russian financial sector, this is certainly another blow.
Zooming in on Donald Trump sanctioning Vladimir Putin for the first time since his return to the White House. He said that every time he speaks with a Russian leader, they have good conversations and then they go nowhere. Is the administration beginning to call Putin's bluff?
Well, I would be very skeptical about Trump's statements. He says something today that he doesn't want to remember tomorrow, and he constantly zigzags, especially when it comes to the war in Ukraine. Is he beginning to call Putin's bluff? No, I don't think so. US-Russia relations have been very poor for years. Economically, there is practically no cooperation, as Moscow has long since made other friends and partners. Politically, there was a brief glimmer of hope, let's say, when the two presidents met in person. But after the very disappointing Alaska meeting, it became clear that nothing would change anytime soon, even if the Russians are trying to present a much more optimistic picture publicly. Trump desperately wants to go down in history as the person who stopped the war in Ukraine. Putin wants to go down in history as the person who won the war in Ukraine. The two don't really fit together yet.
So we're seeing new sanctions from the US and the EU. No frozen assets, though, at least thus far. Do you think that will be enough to bring Putin to the negotiating table? More importantly, to negotiate in earnest, or is he still set on winning this war on the battlefield?
Well, Putin definitely doesn't want to appear weak. Putin cannot afford to appear weak, especially not now when he is under such obvious pressure, and certainly not now when the Russians seem to have the military upper hand in Ukraine. That is why Putin will definitely not make any concessions now. On the contrary, the Russians could intensify their attacks on Ukraine out of defiance and provoke the West with further acts of hybrid warfare, so to speak, as punishment. That could change if other major players such as India and China change their policy towards Russia and, for example, refuse to buy Russian gas or oil. That could happen as a result of so-called secondary sanctions. Then things could get tough for Putin and his war.
More on India in a second. Thank you, Juri Rescheto in Riga. India is reportedly gearing up to make massive cuts in crude imports from its biggest supplier, Russia, because of sanctions from the US and Europe. Citing industry sources, news agencies said flows of Russian oil to major Indian processors are expected to fall to near zero after US sanctions on crude giants Rosneft and Lukoil. India is one of the world's largest buyers of Russian energy.